Should you use a webinar, a workshop, or a challenge? Chances are you've thought about this quite a bit. How would you feel if you discovered the reason why a webinar, a workshop, or a challenge converts has little to do with what it is and more to do with how the content makes your audience feel? And more importantly, what if you could tap into creating content that affects the brain in a way that not only makes your audience perceive the information as valuable, but it also creates enough desire for them to want to take action? In this video, I'm going to break down what a webinar, a workshop, and a challenge is and which is best for you. And spoiler alert, a webinar, a workshop, and a challenge are pretty much the same thing in my opinion. However, there is one thing you're going to want to consider before choosing one of these three options. Now, webinars have been around since the 1980s. When we hear the word webinar, we typically associate it with either something we watch to educate ourselves on a topic or product we know we're going to be pitched on. The reason why we want to use a webinar or a workshop or a challenge is because we want to use one of them as a strategy to grow our business. And depending on what content you consume or who you listen to, you're going to be leaning on one of these three options. Now, don't get me wrong, webinars are still a solid strategy to use in 2023. And you might be thinking, if that's the case, Josh, why would you choose a workshop over a webinar or a challenge over a workshop? And to answer that question, we need to understand how the webinars have evolved. And it's because we as humans crave novelty. Every year a new iPhone comes out or a MacBook or an iPad. Think about it. We upgrade our phones and electronics every year in these cycles. And if that's the case, is it possible the webinar has just evolved too? Now for me, I just wanted to understand which was going to work best. And what set me on fire about this topic was one day while writing a workshop, I asked myself, which one's going to work better, a workshop or a webinar? And it's funny because both seem the same at that point. And truth is, it's because they are. And then I started thinking, why was I using a workshop instead of a webinar? And then it led me down this rabbit hole. And I'm only using it because someone recommended it. Now, what is a webinar? A video that educates or sells something, or both. What is a workshop? A video that educates or sells something, or both. What is a challenge? A video that educates or sells something, or both, that's typically longer than one day. They all have the same purpose for us as business owners, to educate and sell our product or services. The biggest mistake I see being made is we put too much weight on the strategy and think just because we use this webinar or workshop or challenge that it's going to be a success. Now, imagine I had cookies. I had chocolate chip, sprinkles, and sugar, and each represent a workshop, a webinar, or a challenge. Each cookie does the same thing. It satisfies a desire. The question is, which would your audience find more valuable? That's the one you choose. Yes, it's a solid strategy, but we need to focus on the foundation first. The real problem that needs to be solved is how can you convey the information in a compelling way? Now, we need to focus on the content side of whatever we choose. No matter the choice of those options, the goal is the same. I want this thing to book more calls and make my business more money. Once I started focusing on my content, it didn't matter if I chose a challenge, a workshop, or a webinar. Choose what your audience is going to be more drawn to. Right now in 2023, for the most part, I'd say challenges are pretty hot because they're newer and they revolve around solving a specific problem. But don't get lost on trying to decide which one to start. Focus on your content. I have a template I use when it comes to actually creating content, from my YouTube videos all the way to virtual events I use for challenges and workshops. I'm going to leave a link in the comments where you can grab it and join my community. Stay tuned for my next video because I'm going to cover how to write really good scripts for YouTube and your virtual event.